of all things, livery stable owners. Because in 1910, virtually every city in the United States had at least one livery stable, and most of them had 4 or 5. The biggest one was usually right by the railroad depot. There were steam trains, but people would get to town and they would rent a horse, or they would rent a horse and buggy. So the livery stable owners were wealthy people. They were upstanding, well-known members of the community. And then the automobile came along, and after 5 years, their business began to diminish. And after 10 years, it had diminished more. And after 15 years, it was gone. No more livery stables except in the most remote parts of the country. Now, the analogy for us now, I keep rocking back and forth. Are we writers livery stable owners, or are the publishers livery stable owners? I keep going back on this. I'm inclined most of the time to think it's the publishers. Because one of the things that is most trying for us these days is that we have panic publishers at virtually every level, whether it's magazines or books. They're fighting so hard in the book world, for example, to lock the royalty splits that they saw in print into amber so that they can make the same profits in ebooks. And it's not working very well, but they're sure trying and causing us a lot of grief. We also have the rise of blogging and crowdsourcing, and a lot of magazines saying that, well, you know, it's working so well elsewhere, so we're no longer going to pay professional writers. We're just going to have everything written by bloggers or whatever. And you know, it's true that there are a lot of people who write well that are not professional writers. We have to admit that. It's true. We've seen it. There are a lot of untrained bloggers out there that do a very good job. A lot of people have 1 or 2 really good essays in them on things that they care passionately about. However, I truly believe that there will always be a need for professionally trained writers, because we're the ones who can be depended upon to get the facts right, to check things, to get the article turned in on time, to do it right, so that we can be trusted. We're the ones who can produce on subjects that we don't know a whole lot about and do it promptly and on deadline. There will always be jobs for us. There are jobs for us now. Howard and I were talking a little bit before the symposium this evening, and he was telling me what a lot of our members have said, which is that when the recession started, 2010 was a terrible year. Magazines were crashing and burning. I think I counted 28 magazines that died that one year. It was just, you know, like a funeral every day. And a lot of people thrown out of work, also in the newspaper world. That was continuing. 2011, we were doing a little bit better, and now we're doing better yet. And what our members are telling me is that they're finding work. It's not the same work they were doing 2 or 3 years ago, but they're finding work, and a good number of them are making more money than they were making before. It hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been pleasant, and they haven't enjoyed it. They've had to learn a lot of new things that they probably would not have preferred to learn. I'm hoping this next week to take a short little course on video editing, something that I never thought I would be doing. But you know, we stretch ourselves when we do those kinds of things. So these digital changes challenge us, and they scare us a little bit because we wonder where the next money for the mortgage is going to come. But they also stretch us, and that's a good thing for writers, just like it is for everybody else. So we have the rise of blogging and crowdsourcing and low payments. We also we're contending with the fact that Google's algorithms reward the publisher who updates his site frequently. He doesn't have to update it well. He just has to update it. So that has led to the rise of the content mills, who pay writers a pittance, and it really is a pittance, pennies in some cases, to just update, to just write just about anything, to take advantage of the algorithm. At the same time, because so much of the world is digital now, we have magazines getting less and less advertising because we have the micro data for consumers, what we're all buying, being collected, and that is being used in the digital world, so advertisers are not buying the magazine ads that they were buying, which means that magazines have fewer pages in them, the ones that still exist, so they're buying fewer stories from us. We're getting hit that way on every side. We also have the third problem that we contend with is piracy, internationally and nationally here too, and also the culture of information sharing. And we're all familiar with Napster and what happened in music and with movies. And we're beginning to see it also in books. And that has posed a threat that has backed a lot of people in government in corners, because there's been such a tremendous call by panicked publishers who see this as yet one more worry on their plates to ramp up the laws, ramp up the protection. We have the DRMs, the digital rights media locks on digital books. They drive consumers crazy. Now granted, when you buy an ebook, you don't really buy the book, you buy the license. And consumers wonder why they buy it and they can read it on their Kindle, but they can't read it on their Nook and they can't read it on something else. Now, if they were to read all the directions, they probably could find a way to share these ebooks across a lot of platforms. But most of the people who are buying ebooks don't know that, and they don't know how to do it. And the locked DRMs on those books, which means that you paid money for the book, but you can't go read it on your computer. You have to read it on just one thing. Just makes people really, really angry. And they're responding to that by turning to some extent to book piracy. It makes them angry. Couple that with the ease of finding books on these sites, piracy sites. It's remarkable how easy it is. I set out maybe a month or two ago to learn how to steal ebooks. I wanted to learn how to be a book pirate. Now, I'm not a computer novice, but I'm not a digital native either. It took me about 7 hours, start to finish, although I have to admit that one of my sons gave me a few hints of where to get started. But you know, your average teenager down the block could do the same for you. I figured that if I could find out how to break the DRM code on ebooks, where to go to find books where the code had already been broken, how to download them without being tracked by anyone, having it traced back to my computer. If I can do that, anyone can do that. And I truly believe that the publishers are doing themselves a great wrong, and us a great wrong, by trying to keep all those books hugged up tight and making the very people who buy our books angry. So that's an issue that we have to contend with, and we must be continually in conversation with our publishers about that. We also are contending with the fact that we have fewer readers. And that is an interesting thing, because there are contrary statistics here. We have that 2007 NEA study that was really scary. It said that among the readers between 18 and 24, half of them said that they had never read a book for pleasure in the last year or two. Now that's a scary thing, that number. But what has happened since the Kindle and ebook readers have come forth is that there's been a real resurgence in the desire to read. So young people are turning to books again, it would seem. We don't have good statistics, mostly because Amazon doesn't share. You may have noticed that. They don't really tell us what they're collecting. But we do know, just from the number of ebooks that have been sold, and just from walking around seeing all the young people carrying these devices and reading on them, that seems to have sparked a new interest in reading, and that's only a good thing. Another thing we have facing us is writers, and we don't want to think about this, because when I mention the word copyright, even in a room full of writers like you, people get this glazed look in their eyes. Nobody likes to talk or think about copyright, but it's really central to the existence of writers everywhere. We need to know what our rights are. And the problem with that right now is, frankly, copyright in the United States is one big mess. It's just a mess. There are so many things that are unestablished, and if I have time later, I'll go through the list. But we need a serious revamp of copyright law for the digital age, because so few things are clearly defined. We're wandering in the wilderness about what is permissible and what isn't. And then we have finally the issue of Google and incipient monopolies and monopolies right now, and Amazon having such a lock on the ebook market. If I have time, I would love to talk a little bit about the recent Department of Justice suit against Amazon and 5 of the 6 big publishers. Well, I'll just go ahead and say it, actually. It's an interesting thing that happened. You know, the Department of Justice, you know about that, don't you? The Department of Justice brought suit against 5 of the big 6 publishers in the United States, saying that they had conspired together, colluded together, the legal word, to fix prices on ebooks. Now, it's no accident that when you went on the bookstore site, that no ebook sold there ever cost more than $16.99. So it's evident that something was going on, whether they colluded or not, whether Amazon might have just had parallel agreements with the publishers. The Justice Department alleges that these 5 publishers colluded. 3 of the publishers have decided to settle, and 2 are fighting. So it remains to be seen what will happen on that. But the interesting thing to me is what happened after this came out. Within publishing, there immediately began an outcry, of course from the publishers, but also from a lot of bloggers in our industry, saying, oh, this is disastrous, this is terrible, things have gotten so much better. In the last 2 years, Amazon's stranglehold on ebooks has been broken, and Amazon has less a share of the ebook market. There's been competition, and that can only be good. And now the government has come along, and they're going to mess everything up, and we're going to go back to the bad old trend of Amazon controlling ebooks. Well, let's think about that for a moment. Of course, this has not gone to court yet, but if what the Justice Department alleges is true, and if 5 major publishers were colluding to fix prices on ebooks, we didn't have an open market. We didn't have competition. We had 5 very powerful people setting the prices of ebooks. Now, if that happened in the steel industry, if all the guys who own some big mills got together and decided to set prices on a ceiling price on rebar, we would all be saying, that's terrible, that's awful, that's un-American, that's against the law. Yet because it was happening in our industry, and because it was perceived as good for us, that Amazon no longer had such a lock on the ebook market, we're now saying, oh, ain't it awful, ain't it awful. We need to step back and take a real hard look at that. If those publishers were breaking the law, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. So we also have the issue that Google is buying company after company after company, and I won't go on at great length. People tell me I'm paranoid about Google. Maybe that's true because ASJA fought Google in the Google book search fight, book search settlement. We were vehemently against that for reasons I would be glad to tell you about if we can talk afterwards at the reception. Well, I've painted a pretty dismal picture, and yes, it is hard when you're a writer on the ground and you're struggling to find work. So what can you do? You can learn new skills. You can keep your good reporting and writing skills. You can look at writing about new things like tech. There are lots of writers being needed now in writing about tech, writing about business, writing about finance. There is still work out there. You just have to look a little harder for it. Something else you can do. Don't work for nothing. Avoid the contact mills. Tell every young writer you know not to work for them. Another thing you can do, don't steal books. Don't steal music. Don't steal movies. Avoid piracy yourself and urge your young people to do the same. Another thing you can do, promote libraries. 5 of the big 6 publishers are not selling ebooks to libraries, and yet last year 67% of public libraries were lending ebooks. If this trend continues, publishers say they're worried about piracy, they say they're worried about loss of book sales. Well, if they don't let libraries have ebooks to lend, doesn't that promote piracy? It's insulting to say that library patrons are going to steal books. Why would they steal them if they can get them at the local library? It doesn't make sense. Tell your publisher that you want your ebook to be available at the public library. We need readers, and we all need libraries. Libraries probably won't exist forever in the format that they are. Why would you go to a physical building if you don't have to? But we still need to have ebooks available. The other thing you can do is protect your rights. Read your contracts. Know what they say. Stand up for copyright.